Well, Prynhawn da, Emma ydw i. I'm Emma and I have been teaching now at Trowbridge Primary School for about 8 years, I think. So halfway through that was my year doing the Cymraeg mewn blwyddyn sabbatical course with Lowry and the other fantastic tutors. And I'm sure, like everybody else who's ever done the course, we take any opportunity to recommend it and say to other people to do it, because it really was just the best year of my career for so many reasons, and has changed everything for me in terms of teaching since, not just Welsh, but actually all aspects of teaching. So since doing that course, I went back in to my school and took on the PPA role for 3 years, which was the first time I'd done that, but it was actually really good to be able to use Welsh across the whole school. So I was basically then sharing my skills with a lot of other classes and teachers. So it meant that things were getting back on track on being quite kind of consistent across the whole school. I've now this year gone back into class full time as a year 4 teacher. And since going back from the sabbatical as well, I've been the joint Welsh coordinator with another teacher in the school. So we work together on Welsh across our school. So a little bit about Trowbridge Primary. We're a federation school with Greenway Primary School. So there's 2 schools working together. We're just up the road from each other, and lots of things we do, we work together. Trowbridge in particular, but Greenway as well. We're in an area of very high deprivation, where none of the children come to our school with any experience of speaking Welsh at home. And our children now enjoy teaching their families Welsh at home, because they are enjoying it, but they don't get those experiences outside of school. So we are coming from a point of having to give them that experience from within the school. And yeah, I would say when I first started working at the school, there was an element of people not enjoying Welsh, both the children and the staff as well. And it really has just naturally improved as we've gone through the years, but also more now that we've implemented lots of the things that we've implemented. And as we've gone through the years, the children that were historically not very interested in it have now moved up, and we're bringing through children who are way more positive about using Welsh. And it's just becoming a really natural part of their learning and part of their school day, which is really lovely to see. So we have our Gwobr Efydd, our Bronze Award, and we are hoping to get our Gwobr Arian tomorrow. We have our assessment happening, our assessment visit tomorrow. So it is a full-on Welsh week for me this week, because yeah, lots of preparation been happening for that, but we're hopeful that we're going to achieve that. And part of our Bronze Award that came through really strongly and we were really praised for was our work on Welsh across the curriculum. So we're hoping that's going to be picked up again tomorrow for our Silver Award. And that's what I'm going to speak to you about this afternoon. So just to kind of show how we plan for Welsh across our school. So all of our teachers are kind of working towards the same goals across the same strategies. So we start by using the continuum of language patterns to choose the focus language pattern for that week and for that start of a scheme of lessons. We then use that language pattern to plan daily help ahead activities to teach it and to model it and then to practice and further embed it. We then link those activities and that language pattern into a weekly Welsh lesson. So often the 5 lessons of Help Heddiw or whatever, the 5 sessions of Help Heddiw will then link to the following week's Welsh lesson. And in those Welsh lessons, we make sure that everybody has a range of oracy activities as well as reading and listening and writing. So that's something we've really worked on this year, because we were finding that a lot of people were focusing on writing, which even though it's one of the hardest ones, the teachers felt that that was the one that they needed to get done. So we've done lots of work this year to make sure that teachers are also planning for reading and listening opportunities as well. And then we build on those weekly Welsh lessons to plan for some cross-curricular Welsh. So they may be extra lessons on top of the weekly Welsh lesson. It might be instead of the weekly Welsh lesson, it might just naturally fit into, you know, a lesson which you wouldn't necessarily call that's my Welsh lesson for the week. It could be that's my science lesson for the week, that's my history lesson, you know, or my topic lesson or whatever, that just happens to then really link itself to being cross-curricular and cover the Welsh as well within that. So for our Help Ahead View, again, this is just kind of an idea that we share with our teachers that lots of people use, but often people do their own thing within it as well. So again, because we're starting a new language pattern for our Help Ahead View that week, on the Monday would be like a vocabulary focus. So any vocabulary they need to talk about if they're going to be talking about families or about pets or food or whatever, that we would drill the vocabulary on the Monday. Then the Tuesday, the teacher would be modelling the question and the children would then be shown how to answer it, and they're practicing and doing some different games where they're answering the question. By the Wednesday then, the children then are now using the question and the answer. We then make sure that we cover the closed questions as well. So not just, sit my tywydd, but also ydy hi'n braf, ydy hi'n boeth, and doing the yes and no answers for those. And then on a Friday in most classes, the Help Ahead View children for that day get to choose a game, which the teacher will then link back to some previous learning from that week or the week before. So my children particularly love throwing a beach ball around the class with numbers on it, and whatever number they land on, they then have to produce a sentence or something with a particular piece of vocab in. So that's often our Friday choice in my class. And I have to hope the head teacher doesn't come and see us throwing the beach ball and hitting the lights, because that's never going to be very good. So one thing that we use as well for our Help Ahead View in particular is we have this massive big PowerPoint, which was one of the other lockdown projects basically after doing the Welsh course. So we had all the language patterns from the old CSC continuum. So it's something I've got to work on now to bring it more in line with the new continuum as well. All the language patterns are on this PowerPoint, and the teachers can go in, choose the language pattern they're working on, and then find some relevant games. So again, we were chatting right at the beginning tonight about how everything is shared. All of these games have come from, my experience on the sabbatical course. Lots have come from what Matthias has done since as well. Borrowed lots of ideas from lots of different places to put together as many ideas as we could find, basically. So that then helps the teachers to plan for their sessions that week, because as soon as they've chosen their pattern, they know they can just open this up and there'll be some games there ready and waiting with the instructions on the screen and with the ready-made kind of game grids for battleships and things like that. And then when we're then linking that into planning for the lessons and the activities that the children are going to do, we rely on lots of different resources. We have the Podante in our school, and we encourage people to use that a lot for the cross-curricular Welsh, because it covers lots of different topics at a nice kind of fun and engaging level for the children. So we've got the books, and we've just managed to get the CDs after all this time kind of put on our computer systems again, so that now we can watch and listen to the videos as well. And then we use an awful lot of language maps so that the children feel like they're being given that help and that scaffolding to build the language that they're going to be using, whether they're doing that by speaking or by writing. So often we're making these topic-based language maps. So this one is for a year 2 topic of planes, trains and automobiles, which covers lots of the different language patterns that they will have been using in that topic. And then this is just a suggestion of like how I did in year 4 this year. We've done the Celts through some Welsh. And I have to say, I think most of our Celts learning was done based on this one Podante book, really, and to do with the Celts. We did a few weeks on it. And apart from a little bit of extra research and watching the odd other video through the English medium, most of their learning about the Celts came from the original reading the book in Welsh. So the first week for Help Ahead View, we recapped the my something and something pattern, which wouldn't necessarily have been topic linked within the Help Ahead View session. So it might have just been my Sam and chwarae pêl-droed, my Sam and hapus, using a straightforward language pattern just to recap that with the children, which then meant that the following week for our Welsh lesson, they were able to read a book about somebody else in the third person. And now we're bringing in the cross-curricular topic work to that. So they read the book about Kai a Celt, and they did a task darllen where they had to check whether the sentences were cywir neu anghywir. And that then kind of, they were then learning about the Celts and what the Celts eat and what they wear and what they do, but through the medium of Welsh, using a familiar language pattern that they'd already practiced. For the second week then, we, again in Help Ahead View, they were recapping the roedd pattern then. So we went into the past tense talking about people in the third person, and they were then able to use that and this language mat to then build sentences to kind of sum up all of their learning about the Celts, but this time putting it into the past tense and generating it themselves to write about the Celts in Welsh. So that was their Welsh lesson, or one of their Welsh activities for that week. So as I say, all that learning about the Celts then was basically done through the medium of Welsh using one Podantau book. So then I've just got some examples of work basically to show you now from across the school. I've put in a mixture of oracy, reading, writing activities, and I've put in a mixture of different ability pieces of work as well, because we do obviously try and differentiate our Welsh work as well. So you will see some that is a bit less presented nicely maybe as we would like, but it's still showing really good Welsh, and we're really proud of the fact that all of our children enjoy taking part in Welsh, whatever level, and we make sure that it's accessible for them. So here's some examples of work from Blwyddyn Un a Dau. We've got an RE lesson here on the left, which if you look in their book looks like a Welsh lesson because the whole thing is Welsh, but actually the focus of the lesson was Welsh. But the children had previously learnt doing gwisgo as a pattern, so they were then able to use that to learn about what the different people were wearing for their religions, which then fitted into some learning about symbolism within different religions. And again, that's gone from a reading task where they've then produced some of their own writing then at the end of that task as well. We've got a grando task, a listening task in the middle there in a topic of people that help us. So again, using gwisgo as a focus, it was a different group of children who had used that. So they were then able to listen to a description of what the different people were wearing and show their understanding of what they'd heard. And then we've got the cars, trains and automobiles topic again on the right, where they had to do a reading task, reading what the different children, what vehicles they were using and what they were having. Then we've got some examples from Blwyddyn Tri a Pedwar. So we've got the two on the left are from the topic of What a Wonderful World. So Blwyddyn Tri, we're looking at different sites around the world and using the language pattern of Ble Mai, which they might have covered in a very straightforward way and Help Ahead You, and then they've used it within their learning about places around the world. Blwyddyn Pedwar, we're doing wild weather and learning about floods and tornadoes, and so the way they recorded that learning was by using their Welsh knowledge of the weather and focusing on the positives and the negatives to talk about the different wild weather, rather than just using it to talk about the normal, you know, oh, Mai'n Heulog, which is what, you know, Mai'n Bwrw Glaw, which is what they use on a day-to-day basis when talking about the weather, but they were able to apply it to some different types of weather that isn't actually happening here and now as well. And then we've got a Blwyddyn Tri lesson using Tudor houses to practice their language about what is in the house. So simple language pattern, talking about and describing houses, but obviously based on a Tudor house. And this is one of our lower ability activities where the children unjumble the sentences. So they're given the words rather than having to generate themselves, just to give them that confidence. And then they're able to then move on to maybe writing their own sentences in the next lesson then. And then Blwyddyn Pump a Chwech, we've got a piece of writing here on the left where they were writing about Catherine Johnson. So we're doing some learning about the space race, and they've used all of their knowledge of like third person writing to be able to put together a whole profile of a person that they've researched in English, but they've then presented their information in Welsh. We've got a book report from Blwyddyn Pump where they've used their ICT skills and their DCF skills to put together something and produce things. And also it was a Welsh book that they'd read, and so they then gave their opinions in Welsh. And then Blwyddyn Chwech have done a project this year where they researched children across the school's favourite book topics. So they were asking them questions about what they would like, and they went away and created some electronic books for children in other classes based on the topics they asked for. And I believe the teacher kind of provided them with language patterns they had to cover, and they then had to make that work within the topic they were given to create some books, which they then shared with the other children. So my class were invited to go into the hall and read the books with the Year 6 children. They read them together, and it was a really lovely experience for them to put together books about animals and fairies and all sorts of different topics that they'd chosen to do as well. And then just a few examples of where we encourage teachers to use Welsh wherever we think the children will be able to understand it, basically. So just some examples of where Welsh can be used within numeracy lessons. So we've got some where specific Welsh has been taught to the children. So they've been taught the names of shapes in Welsh, and then they're using that in their learning about 2D or 3D shapes, which they would have been doing anyway, and teachers might have done through the medium of English, but we've encouraged them to then use that Welsh vocabulary or use some Welsh phrases to be able to kind of cover that same activity, but using Welsh that the children are familiar with. And again, if we're presenting something simple like a tally chart or a bar chart or something like that, which again would be easy to do through English, we encourage the teachers to actually present it to the children using a Welsh pattern that the children already know. And the children don't even notice that it's coming in Welsh because they're used to seeing it. So they just go, okay, that's what the task is. I understand what it's saying. We've done this fairly recently, and they're able to then understand their work and just naturally kind of referring to things in Welsh as they go through their maths lesson then. Expressive arts is another one where we find it nice to get lots of Welsh in. This is actually coming from one of the topics that I did as the PPA teacher. So I did a topic across, I think, 4 or 5 different year groups across the school, all at different levels, but all accessing the Carnival of the Animals, classical music, and covering lots of different language patterns from each of the year groups' language continuum. So you can see the language mat on the left that I kind of had as the total one, and it was cut down for different classes depending on what they needed. And then you can just see my kind of scheme of work on the right there of how I linked the different language patterns into different elements of the AOLEs, but all through this kind of expressive arts project focusing on some music in particular. But we managed to link it with lots of different things. And then something that we've been working on over the last term or so that is really becoming quite successful as well. Again, it's just another place within the children's learning to apply their Welsh knowledge that they already know. So we've been starting to use it for self and peer assessment. On the left there, you can see where the children were writing their success criteria for a task. Well, they know the phrase dwi'n gallu. So instead of writing, I can do such and such, even though it's in a literacy task, an English medium task, you know, there's no harm in them writing it in Welsh. So that's what we've started encouraging teachers and classes to do. The example at the bottom then is a child who did this completely of her own accord, an English piece of writing to reflect on their learning over the last half term. Well, she wanted to say what she was proud of, and she would have said, in my opinion, but she knew how to give that opinion in Welsh. And then she's put achos in. We've got so many children who I don't think know the word because they just naturally now say achos because they're used to saying it. And we encourage that and just, you know, allow them to kind of use the Welsh words within their English sentences whenever they can as well. And then the task on the right was when the children were encouraged to use their Welsh to peer assess. Just again using simple sentences to give their opinions in Welsh and giving some reasons and being encouraged to use English. So it works both ways, that we say to them, you don't have to know all of it in Welsh, you can put the English words in to finish off the sentences if you need to. So that's just kind of a whistle-stop tour of lots of different ways that we've managed to get Welsh through the curriculum in our school. I'm just going to finish off by kind of talking through some of the benefits and some of the challenges that we found with that. So for the benefits, we are definitely finding that the tasks are more relevant to the children because previously where we followed scheme of works where it was a very standalone topic for Welsh, it didn't link to other things that they were learning, and it did feel like a separate Welsh lesson where the children would then disengage from it. Double the amount of learning because it's a Welsh lesson through maths or a maths lesson through Welsh, whichever way you want to look at it. And so they're learning 2 things in one go, which we think is a great success when everything is so hard to fit in during the week. It allows us to repeat previously learned patterns. So for example, especially where the children are doing something like a profile of a famous person or a person that they're studying in their learning, that they're able to then not only use their kind of their third person sentence patterns and ones that they've been practicing then, but it will often just go back and recap some of the more similar ones where they're just introducing somebody's name or saying how they're feeling or something like that within it as well. So it gives us good opportunities to repeat and recap previous language from their own year group, but also from further previous in their learning through the school. And as I've kind of alluded to a little bit there, that we are finding that the children are switching between their languages more naturally because they don't see it as standalone Welsh lessons every week. They just see it as, this is our topic lesson. It happens to be through the medium of Welsh, which then means the next day they're more naturally likely to use some Welsh during their learning, because we're not having that barrier between this is our English and this is our Welsh learning. So the children will naturally swap between the languages within their learning, within their discussions, and giving opinions about things as well. So it's really nice to see that that's working through our school. The challenges that we found are with staff struggling a little bit to make sure that they are starting with the language pattern. I think a tendency for all of us when we're planning a nice topic lesson is to think of what a good activity would be, or a lesson that week that we think it would be good to get some Welsh into that lesson, and working backwards from that point to then try and find a language pattern that fits. And sometimes that has meant that things have been a little bit shoehorned in that haven't quite been as relevant or as natural as we would like it to be. So we've been supporting staff this year to make sure that it happens the other way around, to start with a language pattern as the focus and then choose a task that allows that language pattern to shine and be used in an effective way. Because we've come away from using the kind of previous schemes of work that were around as well for Welsh, it does mean that there is less structure. There is less there is not a document that the teachers can go to that will tell them in that term you're going to teach camping and in that term you're going to teach illness. So it has opened it up, which is lovely for those teachers that feel confident and want to use like different strategies to go and find activities to do. But I think some of our staff are struggling a little bit that structure has gone away for them. So we're just making sure that we provide lots of support and they can come to us with an idea and say, well, we're doing this topic, how could I get some of this language in? Or I'm doing this language, what kind of activities and topics could I lead that into? So I think that has been something that we've been working on this year as well. And I think kind of our next steps now, and I've been making notes during the other people's talks this evening as well that have given me some ideas to go and bug my joint coordinator with later, so she'll love me, is kind of how we can now make sure that we're linking everything into the new continuum and supporting the teaching staff to find things that are relevant to that, and to identify where the gaps are, and potentially use some of those ideas of non-negotiables and things that have been discussed tonight to make sure that we're focusing on specific language patterns that we know are going to need to be taught, especially because, as I say, it can be hard without that structure for staff to go to and know exactly what to teach when. So dyna fi, diolch am wrando. I've put my email address on there if anybody does want to borrow any resources or anything to edit for your own school, then I'm very happy to share with anybody that would like anything. Diolch.